In 1667, the Dutch made a trade. They gave up a small, swampy piece of land in North America. In return, they got a tiny island the size of a city park, but it grew the only nutmeg on Earth. The Dutch thought they'd won. That swampy outpost became New York City. This is the story of how the obsession with flavor built the modern world, and why the salt and pepper sitting on your table right now are the ghosts of dead empires. Before we had refrigerators, we had salt. Without it, civilization literally couldn't exist. If you couldn't preserve food, you couldn't survive the winter, and you certainly couldn't fuel an army. In ancient Rome, salt was so vital that soldiers were sometimes paid an allowance to purchase it. This was called salarium, from the Latin word sal. This is the direct ancestor of our modern word salary. If your boss tells you that you are worth your salt, they are using a 2,000-year-old Roman performance review. If you were a lazy soldier, you weren't worth the salt it took to pay you. But salt wasn't just about money, it was about power. Governments throughout history realized that if you control the salt, you control the people. In France, the infamous gabelle, a salt tax, was so hated it became one of the primary triggers for the French Revolution. People were literally willing to die for the right to season their soup without being bankrupt by the state. But if salt was the currency of survival, what was the currency of power? The answer will make your grocery bill look like a joke. If salt was the utility currency, spices were the luxury crypto of the Middle Ages. For centuries, Europeans had no idea where cinnamon or nutmeg actually came from. They just knew it arrived via Silk Road caravans, brought by Arab traders who told terrifying stories to keep their sources secret. They claimed cinnamon was collected from the nests of giant birds, who built nests of cinnamon sticks on high cliffs. Traders would leave heavy pieces of meat for the birds. The birds would carry the meat to their nests. The nests would collapse under the weight, and the traders would gather the fallen sticks. It was a brilliant marketing scam. By making the origin sound dangerous and mystical, they could justify prices that were, quite literally, astronomical. In the 1400s, a pound of nutmeg in London cost more than a small house. In 1453, the world changed. The Ottoman Empire captured Constantinople, effectively closing the spice gates to Europe. Suddenly, the price of pepper jumped 1,000%. Europe had a choice: go bland or go west. Christopher Columbus didn't set sail to prove the Earth was round. Everyone already knew that. He set sail to find a cheaper way to get black pepper. When he landed in the Caribbean, he was so desperate to find spices that when he tasted a spicy red pod used by the locals, he called it pepper, even though it had zero biological relation to the peppercorns of India. That's why we call chili peppers peppers today. It was a 15th century branding error. Meanwhile, the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama actually made it to India. When he returned to Lisbon, his cargo was worth 60 times the cost of the entire expedition. The spice race was officially a bloodbath. Columbus failed to find pepper. But the people who came after him didn't just want to find it. They decided to own it entirely. And they were willing to kill everyone who stood in the way. The VOC, the Dutch East India Company. This wasn't just a company, it was the world's first mega corporation, boasting its own navy and the legal power to execute people. Their ultimate goal? A total monopoly on nutmeg. At the time, nutmeg grew in only one place on Earth, the Banda Islands. This is a tiny archipelago in Indonesia, tucked away in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. One of these islands was called Run. It is literally a speck on the map. But it was here that the Dutch committed what historians call the first corporate genocide. They practically wiped out the local population to ensure that not a single nutmeg seed could leave the island without their knowledge. This leads us to the most insane real estate deal in history. In 1667, the Dutch and the English grew tired of fighting over this tiny, nutmeg-rich island. They made an exchange. The English took a small, swampy Dutch outpost in North America, and the Dutch got their island of Nutmeg. That swampy outpost was New Amsterdam. The English promptly renamed it New York. The Dutch thought they had won the deal. They traded Manhattan for a pile of nuts. Monopoly couldn't last forever. The man who broke it was a Frenchman with the perfect name, Pierre Poivre, Peter Pepper. A former priest turned botanist spy, Poivre spent years smuggling live nutmeg and clove plants out of Dutch territory under the threat of death. He planted them in French colonies like Mauritius, effectively open-sourcing the spice trade. Within decades, spices were being grown globally. The scarcity vanished. The Bitcoin of the 17th century had crashed. Next time you sit down at a restaurant and see salt and pepper on the table, for free, remember that you are looking at the ghosts of empires. We use the word salary because of Roman salt. We live in a world of global corporations because of the Dutch spice trade. And New York exists as a global hub because of a trade involving a wrinkled brown nut. Spices didn't just make our food better, they forced us to find each other, for better and for worse. The spice wars ended. The corporate wars never did. Next time, we follow the money further, into the first stock market, the first crash, and the first bailout. Because the Dutch weren't done yet.